sunshine. If you feeling how I'm feeling, let me hear you one time say, cause I got nowhere to go, you got nowhere to be. Not worrying the world, just you and me under the moonlight. We're getting ready for the nightlife. Oh, that's right, come on.
And we ain't got nowhere to go. Driving down that water road, skipping stones. Watch those ripples flow.
Oh, watch them flow now.
And we ain't got nowhere to be, soaking up that summer breeze.
Summer breeze.
On the lazy river, with you right here. Gonna let my cares and worries wash away. Till it's dark out and glisten on the way.
Oh, look out now, here we go.
And we ain't got nowhere to go. Traveling down that water road, skipping stones. Watch those ripples flow. And we ain't got nowhere to be, soaking up that summer breeze. On the river, with you right here next to me. And we ain't got nowhere to go. Traveling down that water road, skipping stones. Watch those ripples flow. And we ain't got nowhere to be, soaking up that summer breeze. On the lazy river,
Right here next to me.
you brought your floaties, fellas.
Hold on tight, y'all. Here we go.
With you right here next to me.
Dr. Ford, are you present?
Mr. Marek, how are you doing, sir?
I am aging gracefully like fine wine, my friend. In fact,
I would agree with that.
I have some fine wine with me as well to wine about. So
Nice.
might as well have some of that.
Right when I was about to get started with you, I spilled my coffee. So I was like furiously patting with the papers and like, ah. So I might jump off camera for 10 seconds to grab this coffee that just brewed. Just brewed.
Do it. Yeah, yesterday when I was about to get on a live stream training with one of the dealers, I managed to lose one of my contact lenses way up in my eye someplace. So I did that one in mono, and I hear mono's coming back. So it's kind of a beautiful thing. So nothing wrong with that. Okay, so everybody out there in TV. Everybody out there in TV land, this is Marek over here with Audio Alchemist. We've got Dr. Ford, amazing producer, mixer, this gentleman. And we are going to discuss today the Dangerous Music 2-Bus Plus and the 3-color. We are transparent yet musical when it comes. We don't want to get in your way, but when you choose to add sound and colors and extra patinas to your artwork, we are there for you as well. So that's what we're going to discuss today. So essentially, we're gonna roll a video that Dr. Ford was kind enough to put together. Then we are going to show his signal flow and routing, and we want to really take questions from humans out there. So that's the biggest one. So please ask questions, because if you don't, you're going to have to suffer mine. So it's much better that we suffer yours.
Yeah, and I do
have Dr. Ford, and thanks for joining me here at the Sound Kitchen studio.
My bad. You know what's funny? Two things are funny. Number one, I'm wearing the same shirt right now that I wore in that video. That's funny. And then I was just going to say, I'd like to tell the story of how I chose to use the 2-Bus Plus, and because it's a really important story. So without further ado, please roll the tape.
in Nashville, Tennessee. I'm going to show you how the dangerous system that I employ. Welcome back. I'm Dr. Ford, and thanks for joining me here at the Sound Kitchen Studio C in Nashville, Tennessee. I'm going to show you how the dangerous system that I employ every day impacts the music that I make. So the song I've pulled up is the lead single from Hannah Anders' forthcoming record, Lazy River. And I'm going to show you first how I use the paralimiter function on the drum bus to add that explosive sound to the drums. Then I'm going to show you how I add harmonics to give the record warmth and beef. Then I'm going to bring in the external insert for the master bus of the 2-Bus Plus. Now that lights up the dangerous liaison and gives us both the back EQ for a little sweetening on the low end and the high end, plus the filters, and then parallel compression on the entire record to give us the loudness we need for a competitive mix. So let's listen. To the drums, I'm going to bring in the paralimiter. Out. Now back in. Now let's add the harmonics. Out. Now back in. So what I'm getting from the paralimiter is an explosiveness to the drums. It's basically like having a parallel compression on your drum bus. So I'm getting more of the room tone, but I'm also getting more punch from the low end transient, more explosiveness from the snare drum. It's really cool. Then, using the harmonics feature, I'm getting a lot more of that kind of vintage warmth from tubes or tape. It's a combination of second and third order harmonics that gives me that sound of a great analog room. So now I'm going to show you with and without the back EQ and parallel compressor. With. Without. Now with. So as you can hear, with the entire dangerous system engaged, I get to lean on that mode. I'm getting all the low-end warmth of a vintage rig, plus the brightness of a modern rig, and the RMS and power I need to compete in the industry day to day and give clients great-sounding mixes no matter what genre I'm working in. I'm Dr. Ford, and thank you for visiting me here at the Sound Kitchen Studio C in Nashville, Tennessee.
So I see we snuck the piece. So I guess we've got more things to discuss.
I was mixing in the box 100% a stem mastering setup. So a good friend of mine, who is of course a great friend of Dangerous as well, Mike Wells, and he's a mastering engineer in Los Angeles, and he was really kind of been on the cutting edge of pioneering stem mastering for quite a while. And if you guys don't know what stem mastering is, it's when someone, a mixer, producer, whoever, will do subgroups that again sent to the mastering engineer so that the mastering engineer can use their mastering processes to process small groups of audio instead of the entire mix. Now, the idea here is that if you, as a mixing engineer, were in a less than great sounding acoustic environment, or if you just aren't that great at it, then allowing a light bit of more technical remixing, not necessarily artistic remixing, but like an extra helping hand on the mixing front for someone to come in and, like, let's say, make the kick and the bass work a little better together. Because if you were to apply mastering equalizer or something across the entire stereo bus, yeah, you can cut and dip and add stuff, but you can't fix interactions between something like a kick and a bass. Okay, so separating those out really gives you that extra flexibility. So generally speaking, Mike would tell me, say, Mike, who should stem master? And the answer is people who are not confident with their mixes or are getting less than good results. Okay, so then I started doing a lot of research on Michael Brauer, and I know that everybody knows about what Brauerizing is, and I think Michael Brauer kind of pioneered stem mastering. I think if you go back far enough, you start thinking about what he's actually doing. He's taking small subgroups of audio and he's applying equalizing and compression to them in order to make his mix better. So stem mastering and Brauerizing, or small batch processing of audio, really go hand in hand. Are they the same thing? Kind of. It just depends on what stage in the game you're doing and how much artistic versus how much technical stuff you're doing. So I started thinking, okay, it was time for me to really see if I could take the next step in my mixing, because what I wanted to create was a faster mix process that allowed me to kind of push audio through my system and have some helping hands or having some guide rules. And so one of the ways that we do that very commonly is that we'll put a stereo compressor on a subgroup. And then as you push the faders up into it, you might gain stage into the compressor. Then the threshold of the compressor is going to tickle right when you get it at the right spot. So the concept is that you can look at the needle on the compressor, and then you grab the subgroup, and then you push it into it. And then as soon as the needle starts to dip, okay, that's the volume that I've found globally across all my mixes is both contemporary and competitive against the, if that makes sense. So I know to me, mixing is a technical ability. It breaks down into technique. It has to do with your ability to make something that is both artistic and a global standard of what good music sounds like. Okay, so I say all that to say, one of the best ways to get into being able to do stem mastering or mixer, working with subgroups and kind of Brauerizing, is that you have to have a device that comes after all of the stereo equalizers, stereo compressors, that rejoins all the audio back together, which of course we call analog summing. Now, in a perfect world, I would have an 8068 Neve console right here, just like Sound City Studios. I think it was an 8068, either way, 80 series, loaded with 1084s. It would be beautiful, and I would use that as my summing device. But alas, I don't have $300,000 to spend on a console, if you can find one. So I did the next best thing. I started looking into a modular solution. Now, what's great about a modular solution for analog summing is that it frees up all of the faders that you're going to use to basically be DAW control. What does that mean? That means much less recall. And that's really a fantastic thing, because I can switch between songs. I can do 5 or 6 songs in a day, whereas if I had to be on an SSL, I would have to go through and look at the screen. I still have the screen, by the way. That there used to be an SSL in this room, in this spot, and the screen is still up there. And for the longest time, I was trying to figure out, why doesn't it connect to the cable? Why can't I get television on this television? Well, that's because it was only put in that spot to talk to the SSL console for recall. So you could tell you the Comcast guy was like, his brain was exploding. He couldn't figure out why they would put a TV in here with no connection, but that's a different story another time. So anyways, so what I decided on to do was a more modular approach. I wanted to get a DAW control surface, which I went with, again, another modular, but that's a different live stream, so that I could have no recall and still do all my fader automation. And I wanted motorized faders. And then I went with a modular analog summing system. So I went over to Vintage King Los Angeles, and I literally went through every single summing box they had in the entire room. So I brought a friend with me, one of my interns at the time, Aaron, and we sat there in a private session. They closed it off for me, and I showed them my bank account that I was ready to like purchase. You know what I mean? So they knew they were going to sell me something, and I went in there, and I think we did like I brought I made remix ready mixed stems of a song I had been producing, so I knew what it was supposed to sound like. And then I had the Queen multi-tracks, I had some Beatles multi-tracks, whatever. And so the first thing I did is send Pink Noise through all of the units that I could get my hands on, everything, and measured the in and out, and did a basic scientific analysis of like, okay, what's happening? Oh, this one's passive, so the signal drops. And I was really kind of getting just a blanket read over what was doing what. And what I came to find out, and I will caveat this with, this is just my specific personal opinion, most of the summing devices out there really aren't doing a whole lot. And I say that with, you know, all the respect in the world for people who are trying to make a great box. I tested like 20 of them. Most of them weren't doing a whole lot. The ones that were doing something, it was because they had a tube stage that you could push into, but then you were adding some type of a distortion sound to your signal. So I decided I didn't want to go with a tube device, or it was something, let's say, with a rocker switch on it that had multiple types of transformers that you could then rock back and forth. And it was like, okay, an audible change, or it was something intentionally vintage. And I just thought to myself, I don't want something intentionally vintage. I want something that's going to work with all genres, because I do flip through a fair bit of genres. Obviously, my mainstays, I'm in Nashville, Tennessee. I moved here to make country music my forte. However, I do a lot of rap music, and I still do a lot of rock, like heavy electric guitars, rock music. And I kind of stay away from the EDM world, although the 2-Bus Plus lives great in the EDM world. And so I really kind of go between pop, rap, rock, and country. So I wanted something that wasn't going to always sound vintage, which might work for country. I wanted it to be kind of global across everything. So I actually left and did not purchase anything. I was at that point where I was thinking to myself, man, plugins sound just as good as 9 out of 10 of these summing boxes, but it was more like 18 out of 20 of these summing boxes. And I was like, looks, Harmonic plugins and Pro Tools as just a one-to-one summing sound as good, if not better. And it's nothing I can't make happen if I want more warm. And so I went back and I was kind of bummed. And so I was talking to Mike Wells about it, and Mike goes, hey man, you got to come into the studio, and why don't you check out my my 2-Bus Plus? And I was like, all right, well, let's check that out. And then Mike said, you know, better yet, why don't I go back with you and we'll go over to Pro Audio LA. So Jared set us up with another private showing. So this time Mike Wells and I and Jared sat down. And again, I brought my own mixed stems that were no mastering processing on it. It was just as it was hitting the first insert of the mastering master fader in the box mix. And then I just printed drums, bass, stems, right? Mixed stems. Walked into Pro Audio LA and just ran them through the 2-Bus Plus, sorry. I always say that. Ran them through the 2-Bus Plus, just in and out at unity gain on the box with no knobs. And I'll tell you the experience of Mike and I sitting there in that speaker room that he has there, the Pro Audio LA speaker room, with like all of the hardware that they've got in there and whatever, and we were bypassing between the in the box mix and the 2-Bus Plus mix, and it's as if there's a certain presence that pops forward just on a normal one-to-one summing without using any of the knobs. And so the presence that I was feeling was kind of like a ribbon across the stereo pan sphere. So I'm sitting between the speakers, and it was somewhere around like 700 to 4K pops forward. And I don't think that's exactly right. This is just a feeling. And Mike Wells was sitting there with me, and we were, I was like, it's adding something. And we were flipping back and forth, and we were like, it's definitely adding something. And there was no level drop. And then, so then I started to play with the knobs, and I bought a 2-Bus Plus, and then Mike bought 2 of them, if I'm not mistaken. So we left there with 3 of them that day. So here's my take on it. And I know this is a hard sell, but this is what I'm here for. I use this box every day. I lean on it for drum processing. I lean on it for bass tone, and I'm summing through it. It has yet to sound bad as far as its role in my equation. And it accepts all of the gear that I want to do and the setup idea that I'm going for, which is that Browerizing of subgroups, perfectly well. I actually want a second one. I want a second 2-Bus Plus, and how I would use it is I would take the first one and I would dedicate it to drum kit. That way I could make use of the mono switches, and I could make use of all 3 knobs just for the drum kit. I would then run that into the external insert option, I forget what it's called, not external insert, the 17 and 18 in, whatever that is, Mark. So there's a you can
expansion.
add a second unit. Yeah. expansion. That's the word I wanted. So I would run it into the expansion input, and then I would then take the one I have now and shift that to doing the exact same jobs, but I would gain 2 more channels. So right now, the way I'm using it is I'm using everything in stereo pairs. So the one that's on my drum stereo pair would then get shifted to the expansion in, and then I would just get 1 more subgroup, which I would then use for probably like production effects. And by that I mean like risers and crash cymbals and things that you don't necessarily want to go through the drum bus, but are similar in texture. So, and in that, I would be very, very, very happy. So if anybody out there wants to give me a Christmas present, I'd like a second 2 Bus Plus. I'm accepting donations, so just go ahead and mail them off. Thank you very much. Okay.
Operators are standing by.
That? Mark, do you have any comments, questions on that?
I think we should. I think 2 things. One, we should look at the your layout, your flow chart, so people can kind of see how you're working now. So we'll take a look at both and see what that looks like.
Could this be
like
any more blacker? No, none more blacker.
It's the Metallica Black album, man. What do you want?
Yes. Smell the glove, my friend.
So
smell the glove.
So I think that's useful. And your concept about Browerizing, did you read the Tape Op article when he was interviewed this last year, and he had his diagram? It's pretty intense diagram, man.
I have watched like 3 Mix with the Masters in-depth videos where one of them, which I recommend anybody. Oh, here we go.
Okay, yeah, so you're just coming out of, you want to walk them through what's happening here?
Okay, so just hold it right there. So Pro Tools is sending out 16 channels in 8 stereo groups. For me, and they're not numbered this way, but stereo drums, stereo bass, and then I have music A, music B, music C. Those just depend on what I'm mixing at the time. Then I have lead vocal, which oftentimes also gets the lead guitar, a group for background vocals, and then an effects return. And so that effects return is typically all of my delays and reverbs that are inside Pro Tools living as plugins. And then they all go to that. And that way I could put like a high pass filter on all the effects or do whatever I wanted to it. Maybe I put a stereo widener on it and something like that. I don't know. Anyway, so those are my main 8 groups. Then if you see the circle around the green light next to the knob on the right, that is the external insert knob. That is the send and return from the Dangerous Liaison. So my favorite function of the Dangerous Liaison is the parallel circuit. So I have a Dangerous compressor that is running in a parallel compression on the entire mix bus. So it's running on the sum of everything the 2 Bus Plus is doing. So that goes on, I have it on parallel processing 4, that drops down, and then it gives me access to add flooding compression. And so I won't get too into that unless anybody specifically asks, but mastering engineers typically do some degree of parallel compression. I personally mix into parallel compression, which is a very advanced thing. We can talk about it, but generally speaking, we're supposed to be talking about the 2 Bus Plus today. So that gives me both the back EQ and the parallel compression. I love the back EQ in front of the parallel compression because the idea is I want to use the filters to get rid of any information I don't want more of when I add the parallel compression. Specifically, subharmonic, subsonic frequencies that would live below. Right now, I think I have my high pass at 30 hertz. So anything that would be low, or 24 is very common if you're super, super, super subby bassy music. So anything that would live below that, I wouldn't want going into the parallel compressor and then getting pushed up by however much gain the parallel compression is adding. So there's that. Then it returns to the 2-bus plus, and it returns to Pro Tools, and then I'm printing. Now I can share my screen with you when we're done with this, and I can show you exactly the way I have it set up in Pro Tools, but I do believe there's a screenshot coming in this presentation. So right there, it enters Pro Tools. If you see the 2 channels, I have an aux track that I call the mix aux. So the reason I've got it set up this way is, in theory, you could go directly to an audio track, have it on input monitoring, and that would be you hearing what's coming off of your 2-bus plus. But I want to do some mastering on it. So I want to do some mix bus sweetening. I want to add a tape insert or whatever. So as I return from the 2-bus plus, it hits an aux track. So the input, as you can see, is labeled 2-bus plus out. Then it hits whatever plugins I decide to put on. So it looks like in this session, I was using Acoustica Gold 3 preamp just to add some distortion to it. Then it hit Slate VTM because I did the 1/2-inch tape mastering tape. That thing is great. Then the MV2, that's Waves MV2. That's a little lifter of low level, so even more light parallel compression. Then it looks like I was the Plugin Alliance Shadow Hills Class A mastering compressor. I love that thing. Then into the Plugin Alliance Alicia mid-side mastering compressor, Gullfoss, Secret Weapon Gullfoss, and then a peak limiter. So a little bit of compression, a little bit of tape, a little bit of harmonics, a little bit of magic sauce, and then into a peak limiter. This is just what I would deliver pre-mastering, all right? So there's not a lot of peak limiting going on, and when I'm compressing things, it's, you know, -1 dB at the max on the master bus. I'm not trying to do heavy mastering compression. I'm just keeping things under wraps a little bit coming off. So once it goes through all those and it finishes coming out of the peak, then it goes into a bus. As you can see, mix and the $sign right at the bottom. That goes directly into the input of an audio track. This lives on input monitoring. And then as you can see, the final insert I have on that audio track is SonarWorks, which is EQing my speakers in the room here. This way, it's printing to tape before SonarWorks, which affects the output, which affects my speakers. And the reason I have it set up this way is that means I never have to turn off SonarWorks. I can always leave it on in my session whenever I'm mixing or producing. And the only time I ever turn it off is when I've got a vocalist in the booth, and then I switch the profile to the headphones the vocalist is using. But other than that, it's on 0 latency, and so I love this setup. The difference between bounce to disk and print to tape, I like printing to tape. Record your mix pass like you would with a benefit of that. If you're in TV and record, or if you're doing being able to re-render, I'm a fan of print to tape, and most people that use analog hardware, they're all required to do that because you obviously can't do an offline bounce at faster than light speed.
There's a history now. It's in 16-bit. It's always a set of bitters to print right in there. A good round the campus for us. A little bit about the three colors, for example. Let's say, like, I guess, so my spin on the idea, it's a unique circuit. We built it. Obviously, everything we do is unique, and so we look for things that will give you that. It was 2 1170 buttons pressed, able to actually achieve that. You're perfectly in parallel. Drum kit into the mix or whatever will give you the Sheen inrush tack. So maybe talk a little bit about how why you reach for Paralimit, what you feel it brings to the party.
Okay, so I like to imagine peak limiting, or in this case, paralimiting, as a samurai. He's a samurai and he's got a big old Kwandao samurai sword, and he is just going to take your head off. Whack. So it's a clean cut. It's as any good samurai should. Take your head right off, one slice all the way through, and you are the headless horseman. And it's a fun way to think about it. So what I like about it is that it takes it very evenly. So here's your transient, and it takes it off evenly, and then you have the ability to gain up. And so if you think about what peak limiting is doing at the end of your master bus, wouldn't it be great if you could do some of that on the sounds that require it before it hits your master bus, so that when it does hit your master bus, you could avoid the need to do some of that and lighten the distortion caused by doing it on a lot of things, or adding distortion and doing it on things that don't require it. So now that's not exactly how it's going to work here on the 2 Bus Plus, because what I love about these knobs is they give you more. They don't just give you 100% wet. So one of the things I love about the about the parallel processing function on the Liaison is that it's not a wet and dry knob. It's 0 to unity. So when you turn a sound into the parallel processing loop, it's multing the sound, and then it's going to apply makeup gain to each one, because obviously we know that when we split a sound, it drops by 6 decibels, right? So then there's some degree of an op amp there that's going to raise it back to 6 decibels so that it is at unity where it passed through. So what you've done is you've split the signal into 2. You've got one that's going in through, which should be unity. And then the second one goes into the compressor. And then it gets squishy. And it's getting all beat up and beat up and beat up. And then when you gain him up, what you're basically getting, if you did this correctly, so I paralimited the drums, I took all the tops off, and then I gained them up from underneath. So what I love about this concept is your original signal stays in place, and the high the peaks stay in the spot they were, and then you're bringing up all the like low when I say low, don't think EQ, think low volume. Anything that was underneath the threshold then gets lifted up. So what is underneath that threshold? You're going to get room tone. You're going to get sustained tails, like if you hit a snare, or whatever, right? So that nice tail right there. So if it was like a transient with a tail, and these fingers are the tail, so it slices the transient and the tail's still there, then you gain it up. All right, so that knob, the paralimiter knob, is 0 to unity. Now, if you were to go to full unity, it would be insanity. And maybe that's really cool if you're doing sound design. But for me, I like to use the paralimiter somewhere around 33%, which is, so like, it's not quite, how do I do it? Oh, you're doing the reverse here. Okay, so it'd be like this. So that's the paralimiter off. So I'm using it somewhere around here, if that is 100% on. Yeah, so I'm using it somewhere around here. And again, you just grab the knob and you just push it around until you're like, oh, right there. Oh, it gets you. You go, whoop, oh, and that's when you stop. Sometimes I like to go a little harder, as far as like, sometimes you go, oh, right there, and then you go a little bit harder. But most of the time, I think when you're with audio and you do something like that and you go, oh, that sounds great, get your hand off the knob. The minute it sounds great, let go. All right, so for me, what I've found is that I do so much of the same things day to day. There are varieties to them, but like country records or rap records or whatever, they all kind of start to feel like me in a certain kind of way. And so what I notice is that the way I've set up my dangerous system, that when I hit that needle, I've pushed the drums into the right spot. When they're in the right spot, the paralimiter is in the right spot, and it's adding exactly the same amount that I like. And so that's kind of the beauty of setting up this Brauerizing type of idea, is that for me now, I don't have to set the drum bus compressor, and I don't have to set the paralimiter. I just push my drums into the channel while I look over here at the drum compressor, and then it's like, oh, right there. That sounds great. And I walk away from it. And so speed, efficiency, that's what we're looking for here. We're looking for a great sound that we've dialed in that sounds like us. We're looking for efficiency, and I want ease of use. And so explosive is the right thing for the room tone that you're going to get. So if I was doing like a rock record, like right, Led Zeppelin. So like if I was going to do that kind of a sound, this would give me all the room tone I wanted, but it also gives you the punch of the kick and the snare and some of the toms that go through it as well, you really get a cracking transient because the FET circuit is very, very fast. And so what you get is it's never going to be like perfectly samurai chopping you. There's always going to be a little bit of a bump right where it bites. And that's sort of what Mark was saying earlier. But with that bite, you get extra transient. So when you push it through, it really smacks the speakers. And I'm telling you, clients, I could show you text messages. I'd have to find them and I would pause the stream. But I have text messages from clients and like every single one of them always comments that the drums are smacking. And I'm like, yeah, it's because I've got my drum bus set up so that everything smacks. I just go through it and it's smack. I mean, I've had this unit since I want to say 2014, summer 2014, but maybe it was fall. So between then, it's 6 years I've been playing with this box, and I've put 100+ records through it. I've got it dialed in. I don't touch the knobs anymore. That's what's beautiful about it. That's why I want a second one, because I'll just take this one, swap it over to drums, get the second one, and just keep rolling. And so when you go back to selecting a piece of hardware, and this is where this goes into a full-on commercial, but I don't really care because I love what I have. The great part about a box like this, it's like, number one, does it sound good or better than what you had? Yes. Number two, and I demoed that at Pro Audio LA, and I was with a mastering engineer next to me. We confirmed just running my stuff through it on Unity made it sound a little bit better, 2 to 3% better, just off the nose. Boom, without driving it, without trying to do anything, just run it through, sounded better. Great. Now I'm at 103% of what I started with. Then the question is added features. And the truth of it is I don't know any other summing boxes that have any other added features. Some of these summing boxes might have a switchable transformer so that you get some degree of a tone shaping, but I don't really need my summing box to do tone shaping. I can do that in the mix. So then the 2-Bus Plus has 3 knobs, and these are the color circuits. And this is really what we're supposed to be talking about today. But all the roads, have to kind of get us there. So I don't know any other summing boxes that give you a $2,000 compression circuit on it. And I'm dead serious about that. Like, what would it cost you to go buy an 1178 and get it modified so that you had a badass paralimiter stereo? That's what I get, 1178, but these are probably more like 1176As or something like that, but with a better noise floor. And you'd have to have 2 of those. Well, if you go out right now and buy 2 1176s and you bought a UA reissue, you're talking $1,600 per 1176. You could build your own hairballs, but those are still going to be $1,000 or maybe less. But either way, like however you slice it, the paralimiter, it's like a $2,000 freebie that you're getting involved in this. So right off the bat, there's your added benefit. And then you get the Harmonics circuit, which is a custom blend of 2nd and 3rd harmonics, which I guess, Mark, if you want to get into exactly what's going on there, by all means you can. I found that I really like putting them on bass guitar. It's very common that mixers will put distortion on the bass. A lot of country records come to me, it's just a DIP bass. And so what I found is I just leave, then it warms it up, add some distortion to it, and I'm like, sounds great. So it's almost, and it isn't, almost like having some degree of an amplifier simulation on it, right? So a lot of records, what'll happen is I won't put it on, let's say if it's like a synth bass or something like that, I'll bypass it, and then I'll switch it over to the master bus, because you can switch between subgroups in master for both the paralimiter and the harmonics, which is super cool. So right now I use the paralimiter on a drum sub bus. This is why I want a second unit, so that I can just use it across the whole thing, or vice versa. And so you have the harmonics, which I have on the other subgroup that you can use. So there are 2 subgroups on the 2-Bus Plus. You have 13 and 14, which I'm using for drums. Then you have 15 and 16, which I'm using for bass. So I've got the paralimiter strapped across 13 and 14, and I've got the harmonics strapped against 15 and 16. So in theory, you could then run anything you want to have more tape and tube through 15 and 16. So let's say you just wanted to run like electric guitars, and bass, you could put them all through there and they would all get it together. Or you can take harmonics and put it on your master bus and put it across the whole record, which is really cool. So having that flexibility is super cool. So harmonics processor, to get second and third harmonics, you need to have a tube stage, which is going to have transformers and in and out amplifiers. So you're talking about another couple grand just to get some degree of a tube stage or a tape machine, or you're going to have to go get some transformers and wire up your own doohickey, like I've seen a lot of people do. And either way, you're saving money versus the competitive boxes out there. When you go apples to apples with other summing, modular summing systems, the Dangerous 2-Bus Plus, in my opinion, it's more bang for your buck. And that's why I chose it. And I've been very happy with the purchase, so much so that I would get a second one. Now, the transformer circuit is an interesting beast. I wonder if there was going to be a 3-bus plus, a version 2, a 2-bus plus plus. I would say I wish the transformer could also go to a subgroup. And I say that because the effect of the transformer is radical. And I don't mean that in a like totally
it's in series, not parallel.
Well, I would still want to put it on a subgroup, even if it's on, even however you slice it, because I wish that I could just use that for very specific sounds. So what I found is the workaround is I solo those, I pan them hard left or hard right, and then I just print them to tape, and then I pull them back and put them back in the mix. And so that's the other kind of workaround. I've used the paralimiter on acoustic guitars. Sounds amazing. Maybe you have like a tambourine or a shaker or something like that, and you're trying to get some oomph. I've done that before. It sounds great. And so what I'll do is I'll just pan something hard left or hard right and throw it through. So like, let's say I have a record with 2 acoustic guitars that are panned more or less hard left and hard right. So I'll go all the way, run them through, add some paralimiting, and then maybe a little harmonics and get them to the where I want them to sound, and then bypass everything else in the system, get it where I want it to sound, print to tape, drag it back and replace what I had before. Then I can turn off all those plugins and I basically just do hide and bypass. And then I've got these mixed stems that are ready to go back through, turn the system back on, and then keep going. So what I really like the transformer for is bass. All basses. I find that it adds a really good low end. It's almost like a subharmonic synthesizer. And I think that's good transformers do that. They add content in the low end, but it also adds a sort of upper crunch that I think works amazingly well on bass to give you that upper, like almost like a buzz pedal, but it's not drastic, but it's there. It also works great on electric guitars. I haven't tried it on acoustic because generally by the time I get my acoustic mixed and to do all that, I don't really need distortion on an acoustic. And in country music, you don't typically want the ultra low end on an acoustic guitar anyways. But on synthesizers, it's amazing. On electric guitars, it's amazing. And so what I've found for me is that I have to just kind of turn it on and run things through it and then print those to tape and then put them back in the system. But that's what we would do for a lot of stuff. If you wanted, if you have analog hardware, you're going to do that unless you want to do it with recall, and nobody wants to do it with recall. So you're going to print through stuff anyways. So I just use it like that, and I find it works great. So, it's a case-by-case thing for the transformer. But again, I do a lot of country music, and there's a requirement in country music that certain sounds have to sound like the sound. You have to honor the legacy of country music while still innovating and pushing it forward. So what ends up happening is that, like, for example, an acoustic guitar, unless you're specifically pushing the envelope, 9 times out of 10, the acoustic guitar is just an acoustic guitar. Unless you're like trying to do some sound design and you're like, okay, I want this to sound swampy, like it's coming through an AM radio. Okay, well, that's a different vibe. You're going to go for that. So it doesn't matter what you did, it's going to sound like that because you're doing sound design. But if you're just mixing something to sound good and get it to sit in its spot in the mix, you kind of have to harken back to what it's supposed to sound like. Otherwise, people go, hey, can you add a bit more wood on that? Hey, can you make it less metallic sounding? Like, people have these mixed feedbacks that they just give you because it doesn't sound the way it's supposed to. And so you have to kind of like learn what those things are and then pay homage to those as you push the envelope. And so the last thing I'll say on that, because it's really important, is that having tools that get you to that neutral state, artistically neutral state, from which you can then push the envelope, are really cool. And that's something that I like to try and emphasize in my mixing is get something to neutral. And I mean like neutral great. Like, okay, I engineered this and I got it and I'm like, yep, I removed all the weird resonances and I got it compressed and I got it EQ'd and it sounds great. You have now achieved neutral great. Then you have to ask yourself an artistic question. Does this stay neutral great and does it just get balanced and live in the mix? Or do I enter a sound design phase? And that's when having tools like a transformer, like a paralimiter, and like a harmonics circuit come in really handy, because you either use them to get you to that neutral great state, or you then use them from neutral great to start doing sound design in an artistic scenario, because maybe you're trying to do something that pushes the vibe of the record that the lyrics and the artist are trying to push as their reason for making music. And so this is going to start to get down a deep conversation rabbit hole of serving the record. But just remember, re-engineering, mixing, mastering, and I say re-engineering because as a mixer, you sometimes have to fix things that were baked into tracking. So like they say, okay, so let me just clarify that. Tracking engineer and producer send you a bunch of stems. You load them up into Pro Tools. First thing you do, my buddy Jesse, who might be watching right now, shout out to Jesse. The phrase is meet it, then beat it. So you load up all your stems in your rough mix, you push them through your system, and then you reference back between A and B. A is your mix and B is the rough mix, and you meet it. Now we beat it. Okay. And so the easiest way to beat it is the re-engineering phase, removing the resonances, fixing the EQs, good compression, a little bit of reverb, like whatever it is, you get it there. And now you've beat the rough mix just through balancing and some re-engineering, or what I might call post-production. Maybe you quantize the drums, sample replacement, whatever. You get it up to scratch. Now you're ready to beat it. You're at neutral great. Now you decide to take it to the next level. And that's where the art in mixing comes. But you can't start with the art. You got to first become a technician and get it there. And then you're ready to go. And so when you are ready to go, having tools at your disposal that allow you to make sonic choices that are artistic as a mixer are really cool. And finding those is really hard. And so that's why we like pieces of gear that are dual function. It's a good compressor, but it adds a sound. Now, Dangerous sometimes offers you gear that doesn't have a sound. That's also really cool, because if you spend all this time getting it to neutral great, the last thing you want to do is throw on a box that totally changes the thing that you just spent all this time doing, because then inevitably you're like, oh, it just made it dark, so now I got to put another EQ on it. But I was already perfectly EQ'd. So in that sense, having tools that are both completely neutral, transparent, but good compressors or good EQs is really great. And so I think that we tend to collect gear in our system that does a couple different things. Stuff that adds a sonic texture, such as a vintage LA2A with a tube output stage. You just run audio through it and it gets warmer, right? We love those. So instead of reaching for an EQ with a low shelf on it, I just push it through the LA2A, do the compression I was going to do anyways, and I also get the tube output stage. Or for me, my mix is done. It sounds great. It just needs a little bit of squish. I run it through my Dangerous compressor because it isn't going to change the sound of my mix. So the 2-bus plus gives me a buff without changing the sound of my mix. It just makes it sound more better, 3, 4, 5% better as a unity pass through. Then I get all the extra knobs, which sound awesome. And those are just enhancement. And at the price point, I mean, I just want a second one. So there you go.
Indeed. Awesome, brother. I wanted to just add a couple points to underscore what you were saying. For example, like the transformer, what's interesting, you mentioned how it feels like it adds more bottom end. what's happening is it's actually rolling out some of the really lower octaves and beefing up some of the upper octaves. So if you're somebody sitting on a, you know, in an earbud or something like that, you know, it's taking your 40 and popping it up to 80. And so it's going to sound like there's more bottom, but actually it'll allow you to achieve a louder mix with more low end, you know, more sensitivity, feeling like there's more low end, but actually giving you more dynamic range ultimately in your mix. So it's kind of neat. It also, the way it's designed isn't just like you were talking about the DIYs where let's just put voltage strictly through a pair of transformers and get that color, because we know when we roll voltage into a transformer, it's a real small throw between that sounds good and too much, right? There's just a tiny bit of play on that. So some of Chris Muth's magic was he was able to do, you know, I'm not going to claim to know anything about the architecture of the electronics, but he allowed you to have a much farther, longer throw in the play of the knob, so you'd have more gradation, more subtlety as you're rolling through it. And yes, it will take you out to ugly distortion if you want to take it that far out the back end. So,
which sometimes you may need that. If someone gives you some weird, you know, amp sim guitar that's supposed to sound like something, and you get it, maybe you do need to add a full-on layer of distortion on top of that. And analog distortion, I don't know, there's not a lot of plugins that really nail analog distortion. So you may want that. So that's cool. I just have a hard time putting the X-Former across my master bus because I get this beautiful country female vocal, and then I do that and you're adding distortion, and then the girl's like, what'd you do to my voice? So you have to have, that's why it's like, again, for me, it's better used on a specific item, which I love it. So
absolutely.
Yeah,
And
anyways,
so,
that's cool.
and that other part that you mentioned that was super cool was talking about what Russ Elevato turned me on to. He calls commitment, right? So you set up, you know, whatever you were talking about. Okay, you love this bass sound, commit, you know, run it through the process, commit to it. That's what it is. Now it's in the track. So I think that's a really, everybody I talk to that's using Dangerous System and making big records is committing so that there's not so much recall. So they love their vocal bus, they love the backgrounds, they burn it. They love the drum mix, they love how they've set it up, they commit, they burn it through the processing. And then it's just about, you know, you're just doing levels at that point. So I think it's really useful that you brought that up for everybody, because I see more and more that people are very confused. They're like, I've got all this automation in the box, but if I use this outboard, how the hell do I do a recall? And a lot of the time it's like, well, that's already done and it's sitting in the box already here. So if I've got to just tap up something, I can.
Well, we have an almost infinite number of tracks inside Pro Tools. So why would you not just take the one that was before the compressor and then hide and delete, or hide and make it active? It's over here now. Then I have the one that came out of the compressor, and there it is. So if I ever need to step backwards, could I not just take the one that was before there and put it on a playlist? And then I can just flip between the playlists if I want. I have before compressor and after compressor. So like, there's no reason to be afraid of committing to a track, because it's not like by committing, you're throwing everything away in the dumpster. Like, it's all right there. It's just hidden and inactive. If you don't like the way you compress that sound, you can pull up the original ones and throw it through again and recompress. So don't be afraid. I mean, and the added benefit of committing to it is that you can then take something and you can chop it up. Modern production has chopped and screwed elements of it. Like, even in modern country, and I want to make this, like, whoever's watching, like, if you're not messing around with country music, you should be. Whoever you are, whatever color skin you have, whatever genre of music you enjoy, mess around with country music, because it's a huge industry and there's no real difference. Like, I still put bass in the spot where bass is supposed to go. I still use 808s in country music. We're using snaps and claps and ticky trap hats. The thing is that the average listener, the average 15-year-old has a playlist, and it has everything on it, from country music hardcore death metal to 21 Savage or 21 Pilots and 21 Savage. That's a new band I just came up with. 21 Pilots and more. You know what I mean? Like they flip between all these playlists. People don't care. What they care about is that when they listen through the playlist, is there a contiguity that way they're not reaching for the volume knob and adjusting stuff. They don't want suddenly the next record to come up and have the bass just drop out, right? Is that not what great mastering is for? Should we not be having our mastering engineers paying attention to the charts and getting our sound producers and mixers to sound more like the charts? When producers come to me and they complain, they're like, man, everybody says they want me to sound more like the radio. They're not saying they want your production to be produced more like the radio. They're saying that when they listen to it back to back with the songs that are on the radio, there is no contiguity. And so again, this comes back to my dangerous system. I've developed a system with it's a fair investment. You know, with just the 1, 2, 3, 4 pieces I have right in front of me that are dangerous, and I have a fifth one. I have 6 dangerous pieces. But the 4 that are specifically doing this are the 2-bus plus, dangerous compressor, the dangerous back EQ, and the dangerous liaison, which I've explained how they're working. I also have the monitor ST and the remote, and then I have a Convert 2, and I plan on getting the AD plus because I'd like to have the AD plus to capture my 2-bus plus. And at that point, I'm so dangerous that I'll poison you. But the purpose of this is to make my stuff sound closer to mastered without doing the heavy loudness. I don't want that. In a perfect world, I send my mix to a mastering engineer and they just turn the volume up and send it back to me. That's a perfect world. It should be a step of quality control based on getting you in line with everybody else on a global average of what commercial music sounds like. If the mastering engineer then has to do all these crazy EQs, he's going to do all this fixing, re-engineering, like we said, that's my failure in both listening environment, monitoring, and taste, and technique, skill, and all those things. I shouldn't put that on my mastering engineer. I want my mastering engineer to pull the mix up, go, oh, he just needs like 8 decibels of gain into a good peak limiter situation, and how they achieve that is up to them. But they push it in and they're like, okay, yeah, now he's in line with the global average. Can I do anything to sweeten this? Can I make it even better? Now they're not re-engineering. Now they're getting to be artistic. So that's the game. And so what I've done is I've set up a system where my drums are punchier and more explosive, and that's just on tap. I got it dialed in. It's what, poop, there it is, bang. I've got it dialed in. I don't even need to touch it anymore. It just happens. Then I've got parallel compression on my master bus, so I'm fluffing up the whole thing to get thicker, heavier, louder, so that when I switch back and I'm like, yeah, this is right there with what I'm hearing on Spotify and everything else, right? And so I really do. I've got it on my dangerous remote right here. I flip between Pro Tools and my computer, and so I have Spotify. And here's the trick: you take your own master that's on Spotify, and then you grab the Spotify volume knob and you turn off the algorithm, so that the auto volume algorithm. So turn it off, put it on HD, and get your own song that's up there. And then you pull up the session from that song, and then you pull the volume of Spotify down until what's coming out of Spotify is exactly the level of your mix before mastering. And when you get it there and you're like, yep, boop, 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 and it's like within a dB, or, you know, within a 0.1, 0.2 decibels, right? Like you get it as close as you can without driving yourself insane. Then you've basically taken the mastering out of Spotify based on what you're delivering to mastering. So now the output of Spotify is the output of your mixes in your system, right? It's a very easy thing to do. You just got to take that step and do it. Now you've calibrated the output of your mastered computer stuff. You've backed it off. So now that is the same level as the output of your mixing system. And then you ignore mastering, except for some compression, you know what I mean? And like how it's kind of dialed in. But at that point, I can then switch between Spotify and my system on the dangerous remote. And I then listen, I push the faders a little bit. And I'm like, okay, yeah, I could see what happened. Oh, basically, the mastering engineer took the sides. He put a mid-side compressor on it, and he just gained up the sides a little bit. My mix was a little bit more like this. The master was a little bit more like this. You know what I'm saying? So why should I not do that as a mixer? The mastering engineer does less work. So when we set ourselves up for success and we build a system of gear, specifically for me, my dangerous system, I've built this up for success. Mastering engineer does less work. Clients don't complain. What I get back from clients, they go, man, this sounds like it's already been mastered, but it's not as loud. And I'm like, yep, that's great. I can send you a loud mix. It's no big deal. It's just a Picla. Throw Pro L2 on it and boost it up and give it to them. It's like, there you go. But I do try and keep a little bit of headroom so that when the master comes back, they're like, whoa, because you do want a little bit of razzle dazzle in the day-to-day business. And that's also important as you become a service provider. And there's a couple things that I think often get overlooked, and the in-the-box guys are great. I just know that serving clients, if you have people that are coming through your door, they like to see gear. And on a visual standpoint, I really like the dangerous stuff. I love the new look of everything. I love that it's all black. I love that it's all cosmetically uniform. It has its little grates and it pops up and it looks cool. I like that it's a little stealthy because it's all black. I even, started doing everything else in black too. My new keyboard's black, so like I'm starting to kind of like trick out my gear, and I start thinking about the gear I'm buying, and I'm like, does it even look right? Because the last thing I want is a bright yellow piece right in my rack gear next to all this beautiful black architecture. If you give me a bright yellow box, I'm putting you over here. Or I'm going to take it and I'm going to...
No loop trotter for you then, huh?
I'm sure it sounds great. Visually, flip it. Give it black with yellow lettering. I'm game. So, uh-oh.
That's my living room's a mess because I'm redoing my mixed room, so I got some gear sitting over there. All right, brother. Well, thank you, dude.
Put my foot in my mouth sometimes. It's
no, look, in the 80s, in the 80s, we had to, Joe Perry came and said, hey, I want you guys to do a studio for us. This is back in the Boston days. And we're like, cool. And he's like, yeah, I want everything black. And so back then we were speccing Otari MTR90 Mark IIs for the 2-inch machine. And we're like, well, this is really the deck you want. He's like, it's got to be black. He's like, I saw this one from Fostex. It's black. I'm like, dude, we're not going to sell you a black Fostex 2-inch machine. So we actually had to take the Otari to a body shop and get it painted. So, hey, sometimes, it matters. It matters, man. You need to get inspired.
I got a story. I don't know if I should tell it or not. But the quick story on that is that one of my mentors, Jack Joseph Puig, was telling me that he was working with Goo Goo Dolls. This is way back when they were doing all the Iris stuff. And I don't want to tell his story and totally butcher it, but I guess he came in and he was in all black, and they sent him home, if I'm not mistaken, and he redressed in all white and came back to the studio, and then they allowed him to continue on. And if I'm not mistaken, the song they were working on was Iris, which was from the movie with Nick Cage where he plays an angel. And so they felt that he was dressed wrong for the occasion because he was trying to personify the actors in the movie. And he didn't even know this is what they were talking about. But basically the band was making judgment calls about the way he was dressed without him even knowing it. And evidently that
never happens to me.
But isn't that funny? Like it really does impact. I don't know. Something like that.
Awesome. All right, dude. Well, we did our hour. I love you, man. Thanks for hanging out. I wish I could have a cold one with you, But
soon.
That was good. I always appreciate the intel, and hopefully we'll do this again very, very soon.
I'd love to. Did we get any Q&A? Do you want me to answer any questions, or did we cover it?
I don't see any here on my side, so I don't know what interface we're going through at this very moment. So
everything
I think
was answered in the comments. Hey, yeah, all the Q&A was answered in the comments. We're good.
Oh, I'm not seeing any of that.
You pop on over in the comments on the Facebook page and the YouTube
Oh.
channel if you want to dip in.
I mean, is there anybody on that wants to ask questions? Do you want to give me any of those questions real quick before we go?
See if any come in right now. There were a couple of questions on your routing with the two bus that we handled. Comments about Mark's attire. So that's good.
Mark,
Told you, see?
No, it's
Dude,
clear comments.
it's the pants
now.
today, man.
I love it.
I've got the muscle pants today.
Hey, how you look, how you feel, you know, these things matter. You can't make a happy song when you're in a bad mood. And I don't know if anybody out there is a fan of Tony Robbins, but I went and saw him, and he specifically said your physicality directly infects your mentality. And so if you're in a bad mood or you're not feeling inspired to make music and you're just in a slump, start doing some jumping jacks. Crank your favorite tune, jump around, get your blood pumping, put on an outfit that makes you feel good. Don't come in a bathrobe and like a frumptastic thing and be like, oh, I have to make this pop record about love and I just can't bring myself to do it. You're not serving your client, you're not serving yourself. So get in the mood. Marek wears his outfits that always look like Marek. The outfits change, but it's his clothes, and he's a character that you recognize instantly out there. You know Marek is Marek. I have a little bit of that myself when I show up. I've been wearing these flat hats for 20-something years. I love them. It's not my look that I always do, but I do love them. So, like, just remember your physicality and affects your mood, and the way you dress affects your mood, and the way that you see yourself. You know, they say dress to impress, and I think that's really important. Who am I impressing in an average day? I'm by myself, mixing in a room by myself. But you know what? I go to the bathroom sometimes, and I walk past people in this big old studio, and I make connections with people I was never going to meet before. And if I'm hella frumpy, or like in like bunny slippers and a bathrobe and like walk into the bathroom, they're not going to talk to me. But if I look super cool and I'm dressed up and they're like, wow, this guy showed up. Who is this guy? And that's important, you know, and go ahead.
The other part of that is believing your own bullshit. So when you're not feeling it, you have to act it, and then ultimately you're buying into it. So I remember I was going into a situation, and my son was probably 2 or 3, and he's like, where are you going today, Daddy? And I said, oh, I got to go to this music store or something. And I was totally dreading it. And he said, that sounds like fun, Daddy. And I'm like, you know what? That is fun, man. Let me go have a good time and enjoy it. And I got myself, and I believe my own bullshit, you know. So.
The phrase is fake it till you make it, but I think that's all bad. I think it should be make it till you break it. And that's a much better phrase. You get up every day and you be happy that we're doing the thing we love to do. I thank my lucky star. Dude, I've worked so many jobs throughout the years to support myself as a day job until I was finally able to make the full-time shift. It's been 10, 12 years now that I've been full-time, and I've been mixing since I was out of high school, and I'll be 39 this coming September. And it's the only thing I've ever wanted to do. As soon as I discovered it, I knew it was going to be me. Like, I had to do it. I've chased this dream for so long. And I'll just tell you guys watching, just remember that this is not a sprint, it's a marathon. And not only that, it's a what do they call it? It's a medley marathon. What do they call that? You know, where you pass the torch. Like, the thing about being in this side, the baton is, what is it called? It's not a medley. It's a marathon where they pass the torch. Anyways, there's a name for it. And relay. It's a relay race. It's a marathon. It's a marathon relay, because the truth of this is that, yeah, we make it look easy. Everybody makes it look easy. And that's the finesse that comes from spending all the time learning the tools. I can talk about this gear because I've put the time in. The 6 years I've had this 2-Bus Plus next to me. So I know it really well. I can talk about all the functions. I know what I like about it. I know where I like to use it. And that didn't come because I got it yesterday. And Mark, why am I in this live stream with Mark? Because I got 6 years on this box and I use it every day. I didn't get Mark to talk to me because I got this gear and I was like, hey, a week ago I got this gear, let's do a live stream. It didn't work like that. Mark and I met because Mike Wells was like, hey, Mark, you really need to know Dr. Ford. And then he and I went out for beers and became friends. And then he gave me a shot and another shot and another shot. And then I went to NAM and I did like an hour talk on compression. And the owner of Dangerous at the time, I forget his name, saw me do that. And he was like, anybody who can talk BS about compression for an hour, you're good to go. You can do X, Y, and Z. And so that's what happens, is that like everybody got to be kind to ourselves in this journey. Everybody looks like we're influencers on social media. Everybody gets on and it's like, man, today I'm going to teach you about X, Y, and Z. But it's like, my thing I always try and tell myself is the person that spends all day making videos is not spending all day mixing. And so, yes, it's good to be an audio influencer because there is a lot of advertising for your business that's going to happen. It's going to bring in new clients, and that's very important. But you have to mitigate the loss of time to your schedule doing all the social media stuff so that you're still doing the thing that you need to be doing so that you can get the 100,000 hours of work in, so that you can really, really become great. And it takes time. I remember Dave Pensato first popped. How old was he when he first popped? He'd already gotten his Grammy. And then it was the Pensato show. What the heck's it called? Pensato's Place. And it wasn't until they decided to make a change. He's already well into his career. Dave Pensato was making hits after hits. And then suddenly Pensato's Place, and his career skyrocketed. But it didn't happen when he was 25. I don't know his real age, but maybe it happened when he was 55. And so everybody out there, just remember, I didn't get into this studio that I'm in right now after 2 years. I got into this studio I'm in now. I graduated to it after 10 years in LA, being in my own garage studio where Mark first filmed me. And that, before that, I was in an apartment with a second bedroom where the studio was. So I graduated from my studio apartment in Hollywood when I was going to college, where I had the bed and my studio in the same room. Then I got a townhouse with 2 bedrooms and I had a bedroom dedicated to the studio. Then I got a house in Hollywood and I had the garage studio. And then I decided it was time to lease this room. And so for like the motivational moment here is I really want to just tell everybody that, like, don't get down on yourselves and your progress. There's so much that goes into this stuff that goes on behind the scenes of building not only your celebrity and brand, there's also building your skill, technique, and talent and your taste. And there's building the gear and the rig to work for you. So what's cool is I've just found that Dangerous and we have the similar taste in what I like our equipment to do. So I'm more than happy to continue supporting a great company. This company is more than happy to support me. And these are great relationships that form. And 20 years from now, I'll be sitting in a crazier studio and I'll have more Dangerous gear up the wazoo that hasn't been invented yet. And we'll still be doing these things because it's about the marathon and not the sprint. So put your time in. Thank every day that you're not working the day job anymore. Or if you are working a day job, thank the day job so that you get to make music at night. Because I'll tell you, I'd probably shoot myself in the face if I couldn't make music every day. That's just how I feel about it. So there's my spiel. And I'll throw it back to you, Mark.
That's it, man. That's good. That's good stuff. I sent Jeremy a picture of your garage studio to see if he could throw it up here for us or not. I texted it to him, but we'll see if it makes it through our high-tech definition pipe here. Anyway, I think we should sign off. Let people get into their Friday, and thank everybody for chilling with us. And like I said, we'll definitely do it again, man, very soon. So
I'm always here.
Lots of
Happy
stuff
to
to
do
talk
it. Thank you
about.
for having me. Yeah, appreciate everybody who tuned in. Shoot me a message if you got questions or you just want to say what's up or you want me to, like, spout some more fun. Yeah, there's my garage studio. Yeah, look at that. That's the back of the fireplace where the keyboards are. I fabricated that wall up against the garage door. So I did we actually pushed it up there. That's, if you can see the wooden planks on the top where the lights are, that's the crawl space above the garage that was storage. It's cement flooring. Look how crammed in there everything is. That's a Leslie in the back and a M3. It was a tight space. I made great records there. So it's just funny because it's just, you know, this is
got
how it
hot,
goes.
man. It got real hot in there. I remember. Looks like I'm sweating in that picture.
It did, but I did also put an air conditioner in there. But the air conditioner could not be on when we were filming, so that was the trick. Now I'm in a perfect 72-degree studio, no problemo.
Awesome.
All right, guys.
All right.
Mark,
Thank
thank
you
you
soon,
for
man,
having
around
me.
the campus.
All right, guys.
Hey, thank you.
Have a wonderful day, and thanks for tuning in.